I had promised I'd stay quiet, make no scene, sip watery coffee, and pretend to recognize my daughter. I find myself wondering whether, at this point in my life, I should be worrying about betrayals or humiliations. We think we already know everything about life. At 68, and then something like this happens. Very strange. If you feel like this story might reach you somehow, follow the channel. Dignity, I learned that night, knows how to walk, and when it walks, it leaves footprints that echo through marble halls and mahogany boardrooms alike. The place card with my name seemed to carry its own gravitational pull. Thick ivory cardstock, flowing calligraphy spelling out Edgar Harlow in midnight blue ink. And there, just below, in thinner, more malicious pen strokes, a scrawl that cut deeper than any blade. Father by convenience. No accident, no oversight. A choice clean as a scalpel's edge and twice as sharp. Those 3 words packed more punch than a sledgehammer to the sternum. I've hoisted portable toilets through festival mud that sucked boots clean off feet. I've climbed hills with vacuum hoses strapped to my back like some blue-collar atlas carrying the world's waste. I've watched more sunsets beside pump truck tanks than lake shores, more dawns breaking over sewage treatment plants than ocean horizons. None of those labors, honest as they were, necessary as they were, ever broke me the way that second line of scratched ink did. Father by convenience. As if 18 years of scraped knees kissed better, homework checked by lamplight, and birthday cakes baked in my ancient oven were nothing more than a business transaction. As if love could be itemized on an invoice. The wedding reception hall in Sausalito stretched out like a cathedral made of glass and greed. Bay views sparkling beyond floor-to-ceiling windows where yachts bobbed like floating diamonds, their lights twinkling as if money itself were bioluminescent. They seated me at a table where the silverware made no sound as poor folks learned to listen for metal's true voice, the honest clang and scrape of utensils that have stories to tell. Here, only polished silence. People with manicures so subtle they whispered wealth. Laughter that curved at corners like expensive architecture. That choreography of those who own the space they occupy, who breathe like the air itself pays rent to be in their lungs. Me, with my shoes polished on newspaper spread across my kitchen table, wearing a rented tuxedo because it would be better that way, according to Eliza. My girl with eyes clear as mountain water, now about to drape another man's surname over hers like a blanket that might never fit quite right. My Eliza, who used to fall asleep in my lap while I read her stories about princesses who saved themselves and dragons who were just misunderstood garbage collectors in disguise. Eliza. Yes, I changed subjects just to delay the blow, the way you might slow down when you see flashing lights in your rearview mirror, knowing what's coming but hoping the moment might stretch a little longer. Eliza Harlow, my daughter, so brilliant that as a child, she dismantled my wristwatch and explained to me that time doesn't break. What breaks is patience. She grew up trying to hide my hands, not out of malice. She always insisted, but strategy. Dad, smell his politics. She'd say with the serious expression of a 10-year-old who'd already figured out how the world worked. I'd laugh, half wounded, half convinced she was probably right. His family, the Whitcombs, occupied half the reception hall like they'd purchased the right to breathe deeper than the rest of us mortals. The patriarch, Alden Whitcomb III, sported that private banking silver hair and a smile that suggested he shared the same tailor with senators and Supreme Court justices. His wife, Vivian, wore pearls that seemed heavier than any chain I'd ever dragged to stabilize portable units during half-moon bay windstorms. And the groom, Graham, possessed the lukewarm handshake of a man who'd never needed to trust his own fingers, never had to grip anything tighter than a golf club or a champagne flute. The laughter that sliced through me came from two directions simultaneously. A tech bro in a vest who looked like he'd stepped out of a TED Talk about disrupting disruption, and an aunt from the groom's side, pursing her lips at my shoes like they were evidence in a criminal case. Who would have thought? The vest just said to his companion, voice pitched just low enough to seem private but loud enough to carry, The portable toilet king eats with actual silverware. The sentence hung in the air like smoke from a grease fire, accurate, obvious, impossible to ignore. I didn't argue, didn't defend, didn't even look their way. Just pushed my chair back, slow and careful. The way you guide a fully loaded truck between narrow construction barriers when drunk festival goers weave like human pinballs on either side. I didn't knock anything over, didn't create a scene, just my foolish assumption that I could remain invisible long enough to make it through dessert. When I turned my back, the band was transitioning from smooth jazz to some saccharine ballad that seemed specially composed to absolve expensive guilt. And it was in that moment, as I took my first step toward the exit, that the microphone crackled to life. "Stop!" The voice cut through silk and crystal like a buzz saw through morning fog. It was Eliza. She stood there barefoot, her wedding shoes dangling from one hand like surrender flags. The silk dress dragging scattered rose petals behind her, spine straight as a flagpole in a hurricane. Beside her, the groom wore the expression of a man who'd missed the last page of the script and couldn't figure out why the audience was staring. The music died with a conductor's gesture. Rich people know how to silence themselves when shame starts walking across the room in bare feet. "We're leaving," my daughter announced, voice steady as bedrock. Now, they laughed at first, the kind of nervous laughter that expects the punchline to arrive and make everything normal again. But Eliza released the groom's hand, walked toward me with the purposeful stride of someone who knows exactly where every light switch is in a doghouse, and took my arm with the same fierce grip she'd used at 5 years old when she believed my bicep was the entire world's foundation. "Eliza, what is this?" I whispered, though my voice came out rougher than I intended, like sandpaper on pine. "I'll explain in the car," she replied, her words sharp and clean as a well-kept blade. We walked out through those glass doors like we owned the building, like the marble beneath our feet had been quarried specifically for our exit. Nobody had the courage to block our path. The night air carried that mixture of salt and gasoline that always settles my nerves. Reminds me that the real world still exists beyond crystal and pretense. On the way to my truck, not the service vehicle with its honest stains and dents, but my personal pickup with remnants of old grease still embedded in the steering wheel's grooves, I counted 12 wounded stares, 3 agape mouths, and 1 silence that screamed louder than any siren. We didn't speak until we'd crossed the bridge, putting the bay between us and whatever wreckage we'd left behind in that glass palace. I turned off her phone's playlist that had continued playing The Irony of At Last, barely needed translation, hanging in the cab like stale perfume. Eliza drove barefoot, the way she always did when she needed to remember that the ground exists, that beneath all the polish and performance, there's still earth that doesn't lie. "I saw the card yesterday," she finally said, her voice cutting through the truck's engine hum. "At the rehearsal dinner. And you still brought me tonight," I replied, trying to pack calm into the words, but hearing them emerge gravelly and worn. "I needed to see if they'd be coward enough to keep it," she said without taking her eyes off the road. They were. We parked in front of my house in West Sacramento, single-story. Chain-link fence with a gate that squeaks in B-flat. Paint that has witnessed too many summers and survived them all. The mortgage paid off with the steady percussion of my trucks, starting up at 5 every morning, rain or shine, holiday or hangover. Harlow Environmental Services runs along each vehicle's side in navy blue letters on white background portable units. Septic pumping, waste collection, and treatment for events. They say nobody notices us when everything works right. People like me only become visible when something goes wrong. When the systems we maintain suddenly fail and remind everyone what we prevent. Eliza kept her hands on the steering wheel for a long moment, gripping the leather like she could squeeze flight from it. Then she took a deep breath that seemed to pull air from her toes, looked at me with mascara still perfect and jaw set for war. "Watch," she said, already scrolling through her phone. The video was crystal clear. Rich people invest in good microphones because they enjoy hearing themselves speak. Alden, the future father-in-law who would never be, stood at the rehearsal dinner's bar, crystal tumbler of single malt scotch. His voice recorded with digital precision. At the end of the day, He collects ... waste. He's a waste collector. Laughter from off camera. Vivian, never one to be outdone. Let's be precise, Alden. He's a sanitation entrepreneur. More laughter, the kind that sounds like ice cubes clinking in expensive glasses. And then Graham, my daughter's almost husband. I can hardly wait to see her face when she realizes she could have had her real father walk her down the aisle instead of the ... portable toilet vendor. I stopped the video. My stomach didn't. I stared out at the dark street, the flickering street lamp, my own front door that needed another coat of paint. Real father, I repeated silently, letting the words roll around in my mouth like broken glass. The man whose name appears on her birth certificate evaporated before her first vaccination. Who took fever with a borrowed thermometer at 3 in the morning. Me, who opened credit accounts at hardware stores to fix up her room when she outgrew the nursery. Me, who made sandwiches with store-brand bread and mashed banana because it was what we had. Me, who financed her science fair projects that smelled like solder and melted plastic, staying up until midnight helping her build robots that could sort recycling. Me. And now, according to people who'd never changed a diaper or kissed a scraped knee, I was just a portable toilet vendor. Why didn't you tell me yesterday? I asked, my voice barely audible over the truck's cooling engine. I would have stayed home. Would have saved you from this. It wasn't about saving, she said, finally releasing the steering wheel and turning to face me fully. It was about seeing who they really are, without room for excuses. And I wanted you to see it with me, head on, no static. I have an old talent for silence, developed through years of listening to engines, hydraulic systems, the particular sound a pump makes when it's about to fail. Maybe that's why my trucks are so loud compensation for a man who learned early that sometimes the most important things are said in the spaces between words. I climbed out of the cab, walked to my front door, turned the key in the lock that I'd installed myself 12 years ago when the original finally gave up. The house smelled like old leather, sawdust, and the distant hum of highway traffic that sounds like a poor man's ocean. Eliza followed me inside, kicked off those wedding shoes exactly where she'd left them as a teenager, and walked to my refrigerator like time hadn't rearranged the shelves. You hungry? I asked, because feeding people is what you do when words feel inadequate. Not hungry. Furious, she replied, then smiled small, sharp, useful. But fury burns calories, so maybe both. We sat at my kitchen table, the one I'd built from salvaged oak when she was 7 and wanted a place to do homework that felt important. She began peeling the label off her beer bottle, that old habit that emerged when her mind was processing complex problems, calculating solutions. I waited. I've got patience for hydraulic valves that take their time closing properly. I can certainly wait for words to find their way to the surface. Eliza reached into a clutch purse and withdrew a manila envelope, thick and substantial. When she set it on the table, it made the sound I know well, the sound of paperwork that changes everything, documents that shift the weight of the world. Open it, she said. Inside, certificates of incorporation, contracts with corporate seals from Delaware and Nevada, names of companies I'd never heard of but recognized the choreography shell companies. Dancing around shell companies in the eternal waltz of wealth management. The cover sheet read, North Star Quiet Holdings, LLC. What is this? I asked, though my throat wanted to form a different word entirely. Power. My trust fund, Eliza said with the casual tone she'd once used to announce she'd aced a calculus exam. I've been acquiring shares in Whitcomb Healthcare Distribution since last year. Acquiring shares? I repeated, the words feeling foreign on my tongue, like trying to speak a language I'd only read in newspapers. 36.8% as of last week. And yesterday, we closed a deal that should take us to 39. I felt my throat warm, the way it does when you swallow something stronger than expected. You bought their company. Buying, not bought. I'm assuming control. She gestured toward another folder. This one, black leather, professional. And this. This is why they're going to hate me methodically, not just instinctively. The folder contained spreadsheets marked with red ink like battle maps, printed emails, contracts with clauses that reeked of nepotism and corner cutting. Names jumped out at me like warning signs. Fairfield Supply LLC, Orion Cold Chain Solutions, Pinnacle Logistics Group. Fairfield Supply, I read aloud. Who are they? Vivian's sister. She's been charging 15 to 20% above market rate for pharmaceutical packaging. And this one here. Eliza flipped to another damning page with surgical precision. Orion Cold Chain belongs to Alden's brother-in-law. Temperature-controlled transport. Advance payments for substandard service. And there's more. They falsified FDA compliance reports. I had an independent audit done. It's all here. I shook my head, understanding nothing about pharmaceuticals or supply chains, but recognizing bad smell when it wafts my way. Corruption has its own stench, regardless of the industry. You did all this alone? With good people, discreet people. She took a sip of beer, and for a moment, looked exactly like she had at 16, plotting to stay out past curfew. Since February. And Dad, I never signed the prenup. They sent revisions, I sent counter-proposals, they ignored them. So it became invalid. Nothing tying my life to theirs. You have lawyers? I have a team. Quiet team. Better that way. I stared at my own hands, those permanent grease stains under my fingernails that even industrial soap can't completely erase. Hands that had pushed wheelbarrows through mud, that had lit camping stoves during the years when money was tight, that had held her chin steady during coughing fits when she was small. I thought about my profession, about the distance between my world and hers, and realized that perhaps the distance had been shrinking without my notice. I've worked in sanitation since before she could walk. Started with 2 used portable units, purchased from a bankrupt neighbor, at a septic pump that owed more than it was worth. My brother helped for about 6 months until the smell became too much. I stayed. Discovered that odors fade, but character doesn't. When you service a music festival in Vallejo with crosswinds and too many people per square foot, you learn to be both invisible and essential. I became the blue box man. People laughed. I paid for her private school with their laughter. Bought this house with overtime nobody else wanted. Made friends among farmers and plumbing contractors. People who understand that clean water is a matter of faith, not convenience. Over time, I hired, trained, landed contracts with city governments. Then hospitals for temporary waste management during construction. Then with tech startups throwing outdoor events for employees who wanted to experience the city without actually smelling it. I grew, quietly. Clean Profit doesn't have perfume. It has spreadsheets. My business became something larger than what people see when they watch me drive those blue trucks. It became infrastructure, the invisible foundation that lets civilization pretend it's civilized. Eliza had always been sensitive about the smell. Teenagers do that, develop allergies to whatever sustains them. I understood. It hurt, but I understood. She wanted to sit at tables where my shoes wouldn't make noise, where my presence wouldn't require explanation. She wanted access, vocabulary, entrance to rooms I'd never seen. I didn't want to be dead weight in her dreams. And yet, here she was tonight, with a folder that seemed to say, I see you, in a way that money can't purchase and social status can't manufacture. Why me? I asked when she pulled out one final document, single page. Straightforward, legal language stripped down to essentials. What do you want from me? Power of attorney. I'm transferring my voting rights to you temporarily. She met my eyes directly. Public optics. They'll say I'm the bitter ex-fiancé, that I'm wounded and vindictive. Let them say it. But I want them to answer to a man they called a vendor. I want the smell of truth to sit at the head of the table. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from recognition of a part of myself that had been stored away too long, like tools wrapped in cloth at the back of a garage. I thought about that phrase, father by convenience, and watched it shrink against the weight of what Eliza was offering me. I was about to preside over boardroom tables where I'd never been served coffee without condescension. You sure about this? I asked. Never been more certain, she said, with the half smile of a general who's already won the battle in her mind. Sign. I signed. The pen scratching against paper gave me a joy I don't often confess to feeling. She collected everything with methodical care, like someone folding a parachute. Every crease matters. Every detail could mean the difference between landing safely and falling hard. Thursday, she said, 9 o'clock. Headquarters in Walnut Creek. And Dad. She looked me up and down with the appraising eye of someone who'd learned to navigate multiple worlds. We're going to get you a suit that looks like you without disguising you. Charcoal gray. Simple. Shoes that speak quietly but carry weight. You'll like it. I like boots, I replied. I know. She laughed the way she had at 11 when she'd pretend to be asleep in the car just so I'd carry her inside. Both of us knowing the game but playing it anyway because some rituals matter more than honesty. That night, after she'd fallen asleep in her old room with the bedside lamp on because childhood habits don't ask permission to persist, I walked out to the garage. My keys hung on their designated hooks, aligned like punctuation marks in a sentence only I could read. I ran my hand along the side of my pickup truck, feeling every dent, every scratch, every place where paint had been worn away by weather and work. All mine. Every imperfection earned, every mile logged, every story written in rust and resilience. I thought, they think I carry waste. I carry civilization. I didn't say it aloud, just let the idea settle like dust on a windshield, visible only when the light hits it right. The next morning, Eliza handed me a new suit still in its plastic wrapper, a note pinned to the hanger, tailored for the shoulders that lifted me up. I knocked my knuckles against the jacket's fabric solid weave, substantial weight. I wasn't being disguised. I was being armed with good cloth and better memories. Thursday, 9:04 a.m. We pushed through the glass doors of Whitcomb Healthcare Distribution like we belonged there, like we'd been paying the electric bill for years. I walked 2 steps behind Eliza, not from hierarchy, but from style. She entered like someone who knew where every light switch was located. I entered like someone who notices leaks before they become floods, watching body language, cataloging who avoids eye contact, who confronts, who opens desk drawers slowly to appear busy. In the conference room, 12 people, a mahogany table that resembled an upside-down ship, crystal water pitchers, folders aligned like soldiers at attention. Alden rose with the confident irritation of a man accustomed to owning the building and everyone in it. "This is a closed executive session," he announced in the tone reserved for reading country club regulations to people who clearly don't belong. "Perfect," Eliza replied smoothly. "I'm an executive. He's my attorney, in fact." She pointed at me. "Power of attorney?" Vivian repeated the phrase like she was tasting spoiled milk. Eliza placed the document on the table with the clinical precision of a surgeon making the first incision. The corporate secretary, a woman with beautifully gray hair and intelligent eyes, nodded, opened her laptop, confirmed authenticity. One of the independent directors, Ellen Carter, I'd memorized all their names, adjusted her glasses, studied the paperwork, and said with quiet authority, "It's valid." Silence like fine china breaking. I took my seat not at the head yet, but beside Eliza. I'd learned enough in the past 3 days to know when to speak and when to let documentation do the talking. She requested the floor for urgent business matters. Alden huffed his denial, but rules written in small print don't always favor people who assume they'll never need to read them carefully. The corporate bylaws permitted it. Motion 1, Eliza announced with the steady rhythm I recognized from assembly line work firm, unhurried, inexorable. Vote of no confidence in Chairman and CEO Alden Whitcomb for breach of fiduciary duty. The man's laughter came out sharp and brittle. "You don't exist here on the scale necessary to power of attorney," I said quietly, turning my copy of the corporate bylaws so he could see exactly where it specified that yes, I could indeed speak on behalf of a significant shareholder. Motion 2, Eliza continued, maintaining her methodical pace. Immediate suspension of contracts with Fairfield Supply LLC and Orion Cold Chain Solutions, pending external audit. Motion 3, appointment of interim leadership, beginning with Ellen Carter as chair of the audit committee. Motion 4, retention of independent auditors for regulatory compliance review. Vivian attempted to transform disapproval into command. It didn't take. Graham, pale as unbleached flour, stared at me like he was seeing me for the first time, recognizing that the smell he'd found offensive could actually speak in complete sentences. I spoke. "Mr. Whitcomb, your family network is more efficient than your cold chain logistics. That's not an insult. It's a fact. I pointed to the numbers spread across the table like evidence in a court case. Numbers never called me a vendor. They call me a solution. Eliza didn't smile, but I saw the muscle near her left eye relax slightly. The voting began. I raised my hand with the same calm deliberation I use when engaging a pump's hydraulic lever, knowing exactly what happens inside the machinery, understanding the pressure differentials, trusting the engineering. 2 directors who'd grown tired of being decoration joined us. Ellen voted without hesitation. 3 proxy holders that Eliza had already cultivated through months of coffee, truth, and patience provided the rest. Alden could read mathematics as well as anyone. His face made the sound of internal porcelain cracking. When we put the first motion to vote, he tried one last gambit. You people think a man who cleans ... toilets ... is going to run something here. I don't clean toilets, I replied, keeping my voice low enough that everyone had to lean forward to hear. I maintain people, and for a few months, I'll maintain this company so it doesn't collapse on shareholders who aren't responsible for your family's creative bookkeeping. Then I'll leave. I'm not attached to the carpet. The first motion passed with a sound like dominoes falling in slow motion. Contract suspensions. Unanimous, because nobody wants their name in the wrong newspaper column. Independent audit. Unanimous, because transparency looks good in annual reports. And the chairmanship? Ellen asked when it came time to nominate an interim president. Eliza looked at me. I looked out the window at the parking lot where sunlight made everything gleam. And for just a moment, I swore I saw one of my own trucks driving past on the street below navy blue and white, heading to serve a construction site where someone would build what they called the future. I said, I accept for a defined period. No salary. 2 conditions. Operational level employees get immunity to speak with auditors without fear of retaliation, and public disclosure of suspended contracts. Transparency, not theater. I second the motion. Ellen said, with the brisk efficiency of someone who'd been waiting years for adults to enter the room. It passed. The pen made that familiar scratching sound against fresh paper democracy in action, 1 signature at a time. Not every repair needs trumpets and fanfare. Sometimes you just tighten the right clamp at the right moment and everything holds. Internally, we processed moratoriums, suspended questionable contracts, restructured vendor relationships. Externally, simple press releases in language that shareholders understand. I insisted on reviewing all communications, the sanitation guy editing corporate messaging. We changed temporary discontinuation to immediate suspension. Removed adjectives. Adjectives are perfume, and perfume only confuses the scent of actual cleanliness. Graham tried to corner me twice in the hallways. First time, he came with apologies. Second time, with nostalgia. Eliza and I ... he began. I raised my hand. You and Eliza, nothing. I held the rest of my words like a mouthful of nails. Words cost money you don't have. Did it hurt? Of course. I would have preferred my daughter never needed to map other people's cowardice with such precision. But there's a particular piece in seeing the game without smokescreens or mirrors, in understanding exactly how much someone's dignity costs and who's willing to pay that price. During my brief tenure as interim chairman, we halted advance payments, rebid vendor contracts through transparent processes, implemented actual oversight committees. One of my supervisors, Jose, texted me at 5 in the morning. Boss saw your name on the news. He included a bomb emoji and a toilet emoji. I laughed alone at my kitchen table, drinking coffee from a mug that had survived 15 years of early mornings and honest work. I also planned a small gesture, perhaps cruel in its metaphorical precision, but clean in its execution. Working with the city, we established a scholarship program for technical training in waste management, sanitary engineering, and cold chain logistics, named the Edgar Harlow Fellowship for Essential Work. The first announcement? In Whitcomb's own auditorium, open to the public, no red carpet, folding chairs from the local high school. They called it provocation. I called it repair work fixing something that had been broken long before I arrived. Eliza called me mischievous. I told her that mischief is anything that leaves an adult confused and a child proud. And part of me, I admitted, was still the father who'd save quarters in mason jars to buy her robotics kits and chemistry sets. "What about you?" I asked her one evening as we sat on my back porch, watching sunset turn the distant ambulance lights soft and harmless. "What are you going to do with what's left of your heart?" "Work," she said simply. "Kestrel Biotech just closed their Series C funding. I don't want anyone saying it happened because of them. I want them to say it happened despite them." "Kestrel?" I repeated, tasting the word. "Pretty name. Hunting bird that hovers high to see better," she explained, looking up at the sky like one might be circling there, invisible to those who don't know how to look. Sometimes you need distance to avoid being surprised up close. Did it work? Worked well enough for me to choose what to destroy and what to spare. I knew she was talking about me, about us. I know how to listen underneath words, how to hear what's being protected as much as what's being shared. My profession, I can now say with complete honesty, makes for easy aesthetic targets. Doesn't offend me any more people need things to look down on, need hierarchies that make them feel clean by comparison. What offends me is when that distance becomes dehumanization, when the necessity of my work gets forgotten in favor of the comedy. I've watched supposedly decent people turn into animals when their bathroom facilities fail. I've seen CEOs punch portable units because they needed something to blame for their own nervous breakdowns. But I've also had children at county fairs thank me for keeping everything clean, and farmers shake my hand because they understand that what I do keeps their communities healthy. The world taught me laws that aren't written in books. First, nothing human is alien to what I do. Second, whoever manages what others refuse to see learns secrets that elegant people ignore by choice. Eliza understood this late, but she understood. Early on, she'd feign a sensitive nose. Later, she learned to use my occupation as camouflage. People underestimate you when they think they know your limitations. When I walked into that Whitcomb conference room, I wasn't disguised as someone else. I was dressed as myself at my best. That's why it worked. Of course, some people said it was revenge. And it was the cold kind, the kind that improves systems rather than just satisfying emotions. My favorite revenge writes checks to public schools for laboratory equipment. My favorite revenge returns improperly obtained money with interest. My favorite revenge demands reports without adjectives. My favorite revenge forces entitle families to learn to live without inherited impunity. My favorite revenge puts competent people like Ellen in positions previously occupied by surnames instead of skills. My favorite revenge requires me to leave at exactly the right moment without developing a power addiction of my own. Revenge, for me, is correction without cologne. The newspapers ran headlines about sanitation magnate assumes control of healthcare giant. I laughed alone in my kitchen. Magnate is the word press uses when they need to reconcile wealth with odor, when they can't figure out how to make their prejudices align with their story requirements. Some high-end clients called to congratulate me. I'm not interested in praise from people who forget my name when the glamour fades. What interests me is Jose getting a raise, Luciana the driver getting better financing for her house, Kestrel's credit line not depending on dinner party connections. Verifiable things. Things that don't need linen tablecloths to prove their worth. 2 months later, the audit delivered its first round of findings. I read slowly, like chewing tough meat. You have to break it down properly to digest it. Central conclusion: conflicts of interest, overcharging, incomplete safety reporting. Nothing dramatic enough for a Netflix series, but dramatic enough to cost investors sleep. Ellen handled it professionally, without soundtrack or drama. Alden finally agreed to transition corporate language I'd learned to use because markets need verbs that don't leave bruises. I would have preferred plain names for plain things, but I gave myself permission to call them what they were at home while respecting form in public. You know what else came with the audit findings? A quiet request from several employees. Stay a little longer. I said no, showed them why. The chair doesn't belong to me. My place is where my name doesn't need a badge or an explanation. I insisted the replacement process be open, with external consultants managing the search. We put forward 3 strong candidates. None carried Whitcomb DNA. They chose a woman who'd started in a pharmaceutical warehouse and worked her way up slowly. Methodically, with a clean record and calloused integrity, I voted yes with genuine pleasure. Afterward, I took Eliza to dinner in a place with paper napkins, because we needed to remember the taste of things that don't perform for audiences. That same week, I received an envelope with no return address. Inside, the wedding place card. My card from the reception table. The father, by convenience, scratched out with such force that it had torn through the cardstock. Scribbled over so many times, the paper looked like it had been attacked. I don't know who sent it. Could have been anyone in that room who witnessed our exit. Anyone who'd had time to think about what they'd seen, what they'd participated in. I was tempted to throw it away. Instead, I kept it. Reminder: words can wound, but they can also be recycled. I still think about framing it with a small plaque. Raw material, humiliation, finished product, reform. As I write these lines, my garage smells like fresh motor oil. Changed all the filters last week, serviced the hydraulic pumps, replaced worn seals. The trucks head out tomorrow to service a summer concert, and Davis beautiful people will dance, kiss, make promises at high volume under artificial stars. We'll be there to ensure those promises don't turn into swampland, essential and invisible, until the opposite becomes necessary. Eliza visits sometimes without calling ahead. She brought her laptop the other day, spread herself across my kitchen table like she owned it, and she had digitized countless photos of us, from when she was little to more recent ones. She wanted to show that she had kept the memories of growing up by my side, and that our life together had made her a better person. She understood that now. I listened with pride so sharp it presses against my skin from the inside. "Dad," she said one evening, stirring tea while the house made its settling sound around us, "I was ashamed of your work, not of you of the work. I was too young to separate one from the other. It took me too long to learn the difference." "I knew," I replied. "I waited. Because being a father is a position that, when it works right, doesn't need a title or a card, just the quiet weight of showing up. Thank you for staying with me and listening this far. Your attention is a gift. Did these minutes mean something to you? Then please, follow the channel. Every click from you is a push that helps me keep bringing stories that truly stay with us.